The reason that I wanted to talk to Arturo is he is one of the most well informed people I know in the area of immigration. And there's so much going on in that, just in that space. It seems to me that we'd be remiss not to talk about it. It's it's been about I guess about a week and a half. I think there he is since my last live stream. So I've been sitting on. I have a whole lot of questions. Arturo, you there? Looks like you've got a little bit of an unstable internet connection. So I'll tell you what. I'm going to start off by telling a story, and hopefully, by the time I finish this little tale, it sort of reads into what I want to talk about. So last night, I was sitting at home. I was watching, college basketball, like a lot of folks, I imagine. And so I'm watching college basketball. My wife was out visiting with a mutual friend of ours, but it's really her friend. I just kind of tag along. You know how it is. So she calls me up and says, "Hey, we're at such and such sports bar, and we're having some cocktails. Why don't you come join us?" So I do. So I walk into this place, and the first thing that just I'd never been there before. It's a local place, nice, and like these sports bars, they got TV screens all over the place, and it's ESPN and this, that, and the other, and like two or three of them are on Fox News, and I'm like, this is my kryptonite, you know. So I don't want to, I'm not going to cause a scene, but so I sit down and I kind of comment, you know, what the fuck, Fox News, what is this? And so anyway, we proceed with our, cocktails, and we order some burgers and stuff. And the woman that we are with is about my age. I would say with 100% certainty, she's one of these people that up until Trump has been probably everybody in her family is a Republican, that kind of thing. So, um, I'm not really looking at the Fox News thing, but she's sort of facing one of the big screens, and kind of under her breath, she says, "They're talking about ICE snatching people," and and I'm like, I mean, but she said it like, "What is this?" Like she had no idea this was going on, and so for the next 5 or 10 minutes, I explained to her because I looked and I saw what they were talking about was, and Arturo, you'll have the details. This woman, Muslim woman that I think maybe was a grad student, got picked up on the street. Just some ICE people just sort of descended on her wearing masks and that whole thing. So I said, I explained it to her, and I said, yeah, they picked her up and she's sitting in detention. As far as I know, she hasn't been charged with anything. And when I said that, she said, "How can they do that?" And I said, "They're just doing it." And it was just the look of disbelief that this was happening this way. And so I'd even just kind of went a step further and said, "Well, yeah, what you heard about these guys that they snatched up and put on a plane and deported them, but to a country they're not even from." And she was just like, "Well, they can't do that." I'm like, "Where are you?" So all that to say, I mean, I had to really just kind of go a little bit deep into explaining to this person who's, I mean, a close friend of ours. And I will say, just to add, I know she did not vote for Trump. So she was just, but she's not, she's just living her life, not paying any kind of attention to what's happening. She's worried about other stuff, like maybe, I don't know, her investments or something like that, or what, taxes and so on. But yeah, she was totally taken aback. And I think there are probably a whole lot of people that still do not regret their vote for Trump, that have no idea. Oh, as a matter of fact, and I'll turn it over to you. So that opened the door to another discussion of a second friend of all of ours who has a daughter who's dating a Latino, and apparently, all this stuff is going on, and they're just now asking the question, "Hey, wait a minute, are you here legally? Are you
Right.
undocumented?" And the guy is like not really being forthcoming, but he says, "Well, I got a real ID," and he's throwing out these things that aren't good to have, I guess, but not really, especially the way they're ignoring stuff. And so he apparently is a dreamer.
Mm.
And I said to her, that guy is not protected. He needs to be real quiet about whatever he's doing. And the conversation that they had was in front of, so it's the daughter of a friend of ours, and the sister is there with her husband. The husband is a DOD contractor,
Oh
high
wow.
security. Well, we got all these military bases around here, so he had to report the incident because of his security clearance. He had to report that he had come into contact with somebody who may not be appropriately documented. So that was just me sitting at a bar trying to drink a Corona and eat a hamburger, and that just popped off. So I just think it made me really feel like I needed to reach out to you, because I'm like, man, people are just not aware, and they should be,
Yeah.
or they think they know, but they don't have the right information.
Right. A lot of people in this country just aren't really paying attention to the details as to what's going on. Maybe they know that ICE is doing roundups and things like that, but at the end of the day, ICE is always doing those things. They have more media attention on them now because of all this talk about mass deportations. And then, of course, the Alien Enemies Act and all that. The administration thinks that the Alien Enemies Act gives them all kinds of privileges and
Oh yeah.
really like violate people's rights. Like there's the whole argument about due process. And, a lot of people are really ignorant to the fact that even immigrants are entitled to due process.
Can I just
Um,
interject? I'm sorry to interrupt you. There was a
now go ahead.
a friend of mine, a guy that used to work on my trading desk. I've written about this. There are two or three guys we talk individually, uh, multiple times a day sometimes. And we were having this conversation a couple of weeks ago where he said, "Well, Trump wants to know these student protests. They want to know the nationality of who's protesting." Pardon me. And I said, "Well, why?" And he said, "Well, and this is man, we're so ignorant. They've taken so much just basic understanding, civics 101, out of just high school, that this is a cat that is a CFO of a business, not a public company yet, but probably will end up being." And this guy said, you know, I think that's a good idea. And I said, "Well, yeah, okay, fine. But you realize just because you're not a citizen of the United States doesn't mean the Constitution doesn't apply to you. It applies to anybody that's here. You have the same rights that I have." Dude didn't know this. I mean, this
Right.
is not like just some low information person. This guy didn't know what I was talking about. And this is, they
Right.
count on it, that we just don't know stuff.
Right. And with the Constitution, it's my understanding, and it's been explained to me pretty thoroughly that it's the difference between persons and citizens. So, non-citizens don't have the right to vote, right? It specifically says citizens in the Constitution. And when it comes to freedom of speech or the Fifth Amendment, the right to due process, it says persons. And that's intentional, because not everybody is a citizen, but only some rights are granted to citizens. So, it makes sense. A lot of people just don't know that. They seem to think that because you're not a citizen, you're not automatically guaranteed certain rights. And mind you, these are also the same people that tells you, "Oh, the Constitution doesn't grant you rights; God does." Right?
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, they want to deny people the right to due process. So, the ACLU recently, yesterday, got a hold of what qualifies a migrant to be deported under the Alien Enemies Act, right? And
Mm-hmm.
since it's specific to Tren de Aragua, the Venezuelan gang. It's specific to Venezuelans, but the guidelines are pretty vague. And essentially, it's if an ICE agent sees a tattoo and declares that to be a gang tattoo, then that's enough. And there's like this whole point system, right? So if you have a tattoo that they determine is affiliated with gangs, that's 4 points. If you have like we're talking branded stuff like clothes, like certain Nike or Reebok or something like that.
Yeah, I saw
So
that, like
like
Michael
that,
Jordan T-shirts, and
right?
I'd be in
That
trouble, dude.
right, that counts too, right? So it's like a tattoo is 4 points, a branded shirt is 4 points. You only need 8 to be deported under those guidelines. And there's so many things. Like if you have someone in your phone that ICE determined is a Tren de Aragua member, then that automatically gets you put on the deportation list. That's worth like something like 10 points. And you only need 8 to get deported. So the whole thing is it leaves open the door for some really heavy discrimination, racism to play into the whole thing. And we got a lot of ICE agents and border patrol agents, and yeah, some of them are Latino, but a lot of them are really racist, and a lot of them are in that job because of that. Um, so when it comes to this whole ICE thing, there's the one guy who was deported to El Salvador who had an autism awareness tattoo, and
Is
even
that
after
a
he,
ribbon or something like that?
yeah, it's a ribbon, and it was colored, a whole bunch of different colors, basically the color of the rainbow. Um, and he had it for, I believe it was his little brother, to show support and solidarity with his autistic brother. And he explained this all to the ICE agents. And after a few hours, they cleared him as basically not a gang member and deported him anyway. And it was all based on starting with that tattoo, an autism awareness tattoo. So, the way the guidelines are set up,
Let
it's
me
kind
let
of,
me ask you this, Arturo. Not to interrupt, but these guidelines that you're mentioning, is this public information anybody can read, or what's the story?
yeah, I downloaded them this morning. The ACLU got a hold of them through a court filing, and Aaron Reichlin Melnick from the American Immigration Council posted them on Twitter yesterday. He posted a bunch of screenshots and then the link to the court listener link. And I downloaded it yesterday, and I'm going through it today. It's 156 pages. The whole order is, and I'm writing up a little report on it, but the whole thing, like I said, is open ended and doesn't provide a strict enough guideline for an ICE agent to say that this is or isn't a gang tattoo. Now, if you look at like the ICE database for what they have listed as gang tattoos, there are so many random tattoos. And if you do a reverse image search, you can see that they just downloaded these off the internet somewhere and they're claiming they're gang affiliated tattoos. Some of them are Michael Jordan tattoos with the number 23. Some of them don't have the number 23 and it's just the Jordan logo. So it's it's really dumb, but it also, sorry, my dogs are acting up over here. But it also speaks to how tattoos are used to villainize non-white communities, right? Because you know they've always historically been used, and they always use random stuff like a Jordan tattoo, for example. They put you in a gang database because there's this tattoo in the database, whether it was put in there inadvertently or intentionally or not. And this plays into that history of using culturally significant tattoos, like for example a Jordan tattoo
Hmm. And criminal.
for right, or an eagle or something like that, and criminalizing it. And that's what's happening now, but it's happening on a level where we're dealing with an agency that's rarely ever held accountable, right? There's not a lot of oversight of ICE. Their oversight is Homeland Security, and Homeland Security is shady as hell. So, you have all these agencies like Border Patrol, Homeland Security Investigations, ICE, all underneath the Homeland Security umbrella, and basically they are their own oversight. So they essentially get away with a lot. And you hear of all these sexual assault cases in detention centers, like the three deaths so far this year in ICE detention centers. Two were in that Chrome facility in Miami. When you look at Miami, for example, the Chrome facility there can only hold 500 people, but the capacity right now it's at 1,700. And there's the videos that are coming out of there from a migrant who's filming videos in there. It's showing guys that are sleeping in a room with no beds. There's just chairs like you would see in a hospital waiting room. And they've been in there longer than 30 days. Their cases haven't been processed. There's a shortage of food. There's a shortage of like medical attention. And Chrome is supposed to be specifically for people with mental health or disorders or any type of significant health issues. And that's what that facility is for. And they just can't meet the demand because they're full. And the most recent death in there was that Ukrainian who was here, fled the war in Ukraine, was under protection from Biden under Biden until 2026. Trump revoked it. He ends up getting thrown into deportation proceedings, gets thrown in the Chrome detention center, and then like 2 or 3 weeks later, he dies in the facility from medical complications because they couldn't meet his medical needs. So there's issues like this that are starting to mount everywhere, and um, it's only a matter of time before ICE just can't gloss it over anymore. Even with people like Homeland Security, like Kristi Noem and Tom Homan, who are going to be really reluctant to report any of these things out. It's going to be hard not to notice it because journalists are all over it, reporters are all over it. All the cases of innocent people being sent to Guantanamo, innocent people to El Salvador, innocent people being detained randomly. Even dreamers, U.S. citizens are being rounded up in these things, and it's like I said, it's a matter of time before they find themselves in a position where they just can't cover for themselves. You have
Hmm.
all these other agencies involved too now that I think may complicate matters for ICE in the long run. But when you look at these other agencies like the FBI's and the DEA's and ATFs, they have their own pretty incriminating history. They've all done some pretty shady things in their past, infiltrating civil rights groups and things
Yep.
like that. So like they're not the most honorable departments out there, but my hope is that, DEA agent or an FBI agent or something, ATF sees something or US Marshal sees something like, hey, that's not, we can't be doing this, this isn't right, whatever. But so far we haven't seen any of that. And
Well, the thing
that's
about it is, it's only been a couple of months. It
right.
seems
That's
like it's
true.
been a couple of years, but there's just so much that's occurred in a really short period of time. Even just outside of immigration, you got any number of different scandals, I guess you could say.
Right.
So, what is happening on the legal front? In terms, I read about, and I'll be honest, I haven't had the chance to dig in too much or as much as I would like. However, I do seem to be seeing Trump getting slapped down by these
Mhm.
judges, but it feels like he's just doing what he wants to anyway.
Yeah, and a lot of that, I attribute a lot of that to all the rhetoric around ignoring the judges, the whole ignoring court decisions, because they keep doing it. And, they just disappeared more people too. We keep saying that in our little community of immigration reporters, but
Yeah.
they just disappeared more people to Guantanamo. They disappeared more to El Salvador. Um, And I don't know what it's going to take to stop them, but in court they are essentially getting their asses handed to them regularly. Um, there's a lot of issues over the Alien Enemies Act and all that, but like you said, it hasn't stopped them from doing anything. They're still pushing forward as if the Alien Enemies Act is in effect, even though there was the whole thing about Trump saying he didn't sign it,
Yeah,
which is
well,
which is to say who did.
anytime there's heat,
Uh,
he's going to run for the hills. We know this.
right, right. Yeah, I noticed he was quickly pointing to how well Marco Rubio's doing at the State Department to dodge that question, and I was
Yeah.
like, oh, he's already throwing him under the bus.
Now,
But
speaking of Rubio, isn't there some, and I think it may um, have been what led to this woman that I mentioned earlier, and being detained because she hadn't really done anything except write an op-ed in a
right,
university newspaper, which, geez, I mean that's a low bar. But
right.
apparently, the Secretary of State can revoke someone's, you know, documentation without even. I mean, you explain it, but I'd never heard that before.
Yeah, so that's a bit of a gray area for me, but from what I understand is they're invoking that rule or that law on shaky ground because if I'm not mistaken, it was deemed unconstitutional once before. So there are a lot of questions as to whether the State Department can unilaterally do that. Because typically to revoke a green card or someone's citizenship, because for those who don't know, a green card isn't citizenship, it's just permanent residency. Citizenship is a whole different ballgame. But to revoke someone's citizenship or green card, you typically have to go through the court system. Only a judge can do that. And it only happens in cases of like a felony arrest or something like that. There has been cases of veterans who lost their green card status for like simple marijuana possession and ended up getting deported and are stuck in
Mm,
Mexico.
okay.
Several hundred, several hundred of those. But that's happened for the last couple of decades. Um, and so yeah, there's typically a crime involved with revoking someone's green card, and it's typically a violent crime.
Hmm.
Very rare, you see the occasional revocation for a DUI, but it's maybe after multiple, like if that 3 DUIs, they might revoke your green card, which starts deportation proceedings, but doesn't mean you automatically have to deport. You
Hmm.
could be in deportation proceedings for years or a decade and not have an order of deportation. So there are a lot of things that they're skipping over, and I guess they presume that the Alien Enemies Act allows them to do this, and they're basing a lot of what they're doing off of history, but they're not really looking at the legal challenges in history either.
Well,
From when
of
they
course not. That
in
doesn't
turning
really help
Japanese
their argument.
people,
And
right,
I
right,
mean, at the basic level, um, doesn't the Alien Enemies Act require? It's supposed to be in wartime, right? Because
right.
it's only really been invoked, to my understanding. I mean, we're talking about like the Revolutionary War and maybe the two World Wars, something like that.
Yeah, I think it was War of 1812 and World War One.
Yeah. Okay.
Maybe it was the two world wars. Yeah, I don't remember, but
But I mean,
it is.
the point I think is that these guys, when you really think about the fact that almost um, every leg they have to stand on is based on stuff that's literally like pre-slavery era stuff, and
Right.
so you know essentially when they say they want to America great again, this is the time frame they're talking about. I mean, to have to go back to the 1700s to find some sort of a legal leg to stand on is pretty, to me anyway, it's pretty obvious.
Yeah, there are a lot of things about their arguments that are really shaky. And if you read a lot of the executive orders, some of them they cite the wrong law. Like they're written like they're meant to sound professional, But then when you look at how they cite the wrong laws or use the wrong language, you have to really wonder who's approving these things. Um, you know, you're surrounded by billionaires and lawyers and all this stuff. You would think somebody would proofread something, but
Well, they're not
you
really getting
know,
the best people. I mean, let's just,
right,
I mean,
right,
Pam Bondi.
right.
I mean, I'm no
You know,
lawyer, but are you seriously telling me you couldn't, you can't? But when
right,
you need people that are just going to go along, these are the people you get
this is true. Yeah,
that are
yeah. So
really so happy to freaking be there in the role. They're
right,
going to just do whatever.
yeah. That's Marco Rubio to me, but he's always wanted to be Secretary of State. He's
Man,
got it, so
I
he's
think
gonna
he'd
do whatever.
be real unhappy with his place in history.
Yeah, I think so too. I really do too. You know, it's there's a going back to how shaky some of this stuff is. When you look at what the context of how they're challenging the 14th Amendment, for example, right? Because the 14th Amendment applies to all people, all persons under the jurisdiction of the U.S. government, right?
Hmm.
If you're here, that's what that means. You're under the jurisdiction, right? If undocumented Juan is driving down the road doing 65 into 55, is he not going to get pulled over? Of course he is, because he's under the jurisdiction.
Right.
Their argument is that because migrants aren't citizens, that they're not under the jurisdiction of the United States.
Yeah, I've seen that's
Therefore,
pretty weak.
yeah, it's very weak because I mean, you're under the jurisdiction of the city, the county, the state, the nation, right? And basically in that order. So to say that they're not under the jurisdiction is definitely a weak argument. But then also to say that anyone who crosses the border is undocumented or is an illegal is also wrong to say that because as long as someone crosses the border and turns themselves in, that's a legal way to claim asylum. You have to be on U.S. soil. The minute they see a border patrol agent and run, that's when they broke the law. If they're
Hmm.
not turning themselves in, now you're breaking that. That's a criminal. But there are issues with like a lot of the
Wait a minute.
language.
So just the act of not coming, so somebody that instead of coming in at a point of entry, crosses the Rio Grande or whatever and comes in, as long as they turn themselves in, they're good. Is that what you're saying?
Right. Yeah, and the law is specific, and even mentions in between points of entry. Um, if someone's interdicted at sea by U.S. agents, they're supposed to be granted an opportunity to apply for asylum. So the law is very specific. Once you don't turn yourself in, if you just keep walking, then you're not legally in the country. And technically, the law grants a year to provide for asylum once you enter the country. But if you crossed the border and didn't turn yourself in, then you're in violation of the law. The whole year window is typically for people who are on a visa, and that visa expires and they want to claim asylum. They'll have like a year window to file
Mm.
that asylum. But um, I'm not a lawyer or anything. I know this stuff because my parents have had to go through it. I've had a lot of cousins go through it. I've been covering immigration forever. Um, and that's basically how I understand everything to work. But um, yeah, they're the going back to like shaky ground. Like we have the tattoos. You have their justification for challenging certain laws, and I don't know if they just think because they have a conservative Supreme Court that automatically that court's going to side with them in the end. But I don't know. I don't know that they will. Some of these,
Well, there've been some surprising verdicts the
right, right.
well, since he's been in, um, and I'm trying to. Do you know the cases that are sort of teed up for the Supreme Court currently
No,
related
I do
to? I saw. I should have prepared a little bit better. I'm trying to think because the reason I was even thinking about it is Amy Coney Barrett has just kind of been a wild card all of a sudden
yeah,
in
yeah,
terms of how she's ruled on. on some of this stuff.
Yeah, and was it Roberts that
Oh
came
yeah,
out and said something because they
yeah.
tried to impeach that judge?
Well, yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen that before, where
Yeah, I don't think so either.
Chief Justice just spits out a letter, and you can go in and describe it a little bit. But I guess that was when Trump lost the case, and whenever they lose, they have it in their head that they're not ever supposed to lose, no matter how bad their lawyering is.
Right, right.
And so, yeah, that was when they were talking about impeaching the judge, and you know, they're putting these
Yeah,
people in danger too, dude.
they really are. They really are. The whole idea, like now, I heard JD Vance, and I can't remember who else said something about how a judge doesn't have the authority to stand in the president's way, or how did
I don't
JD
know what's wrong with that guy. Yeah, he says all kinds of crazy stuff. Yeah, I mean, it's like the idea is the president does something, and when he does it, that makes it legal, like Nixon said.
right, right.
That's scary.
That is scary. That is scary. And I see a lot of the piece I'm working on now, or they actually publish it this morning, was looking at why Donald Trump loves El Salvador and Argentina so much. And I was pointing out that Nayib Bukele, president of El Salvador, and Javier Milei, president of Argentina, are both in the process of doing stuff that Trump wants to do. When Milei got into office, he started sequestering funds right away. I mean, he went all out, shut down the Department of Education, the Ministry of like Women's Affairs, like all kinds of different stuff like that, like what Trump is
Hmm.
doing. Slash
The playbook.
budgets, right, laid tons of people off. And then, with Bukele in El Salvador, he's done some of the same things, but I think why Trump likes him so much is because in the El Salvador Constitution, Bukele shouldn't have been able to run for reelection. One term is it.
Mm,
And he ran anyway, and he won. And he's still in office. He's serving a second term, talking about running a third term.
mm,
And a lot of it is because, like the United States, Nayib Bukele has his party controlling all branches of government. So much so that they fired 5 Supreme Court justices and replaced them with people that are friendly to Bukele. Got rid of the Attorney General, replaced them with somebody friendly to Bukele. So and they've eliminated a lot of seats in their legislative body, taking away a lot of representation from opposing parties. And again, he said he's going to run for a third election. He just won a few months ago. He's already talking about running again, and the Constitution explicitly bars running for reelection. You're only allowed one term in El Salvador. So I've been thinking about this whole El Salvador Trump connection over the weekend, and then Trump starts saying, I'm just going to run for a third term because essentially he's saying there's a way to do it. And that's Bukele. He
okay.
I don't know
Okay.
I don't know what they have in terms of a stopgap and something to stop Bukele from putting himself on the ballot, like we would here.
Sure.
I would think here in the United States, Donald Trump's not allowed to run. He's just not going to be on the ballot, right? If you
Hmm.
want him to win, you're going to have to write him in or whatever. And that's how I see it happening here. But Trump saying the things he said over the weekend just made me think of Bukele and made me think that Trump is just going to stay in it.
Everything the
You
guy
know,
does is he telegraphs everything
he
that he's
does.
going to
He
do,
does.
and it's a marketing tool where he just says it, and at first it's, oh, I was just joking, then it turns into, oh, look at what's happening with this scandal with the whole um, you know Hegseth and the whole war plans all on Signal and
Yeah.
everything. I mean, at first it was like it's a lie. Then it's, well, it happened, but it was legal. Now it's,
Right.
why are we even talking about this? It just, that's the evolution of how they operate. And the media falls for it every single time, which just is disappointing. But
Yeah.
the way it should be done, you saw what happened in France today, or I guess yesterday, their time. Marine Le Pen,
Yeah.
you know,
Big deal.
basically found guilty of embezzlement from Parliament,
Yeah.
embezzling money from Parliament, and they say you can't run, and that's that.
Yeah.
And she can appeal, but at least from what I read in the Guardian, she can appeal, and that may affect the sentence and the fine, but it's not going to affect whether or not she can run. And I think it was
Right.
4 or 5 years she's out.
I think it's 5. Yeah. 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 That's a pretty big deal, because she's a
It's just
pretty
so
polarized.
disappointing that America, we've been going around. I'm old enough to have seen America wagging their finger at leaders from other countries for decades. This is what you need to do, and we're the example. You know, exceptional and so forth. And now look at us, laughing stock.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
it's really sad. My wife and I we just wonder, what in the world are our kids going to do? I've got a kid, a daughter graduating from college, a son that's in, underclassmen in college, a couple of grown sons from my first marriage, and you just like, I don't even know if leaving the country is really that helpful. Perhaps it is. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't either. That's not, leaving the country is not a thought that crosses my mind often, but in the last year or so, I've thought about Cuba a couple times. but but
Mexico's looking pretty good too, I have to say, man.
yeah, yeah, it is, and it's right there for me. So, but but yeah, it's just the whole thing is weird that we are. I mean, I know that we've been steadily becoming a laughing stock on the world stage, and like a lot of countries are cutting off their reliance from us and have been for a
How can they
while.
not? You know.
But Donald Trump is speeding that up like
Well,
at a tremendous rate.
we just closed out the worst quarter. I'm talking about the financial markets. The worst
Hmm.
quarter, I think, since back in terms of in relation to other nations' economies. The worst quarter since back in the 60s, maybe. And
Wow.
just the worst, just excluding the other countries. We're talking about a guy that got handed a pretty darn good economy. Now, I acknowledge it didn't feel like that to everybody, but
Right. Right.
unemployment was what it was. Inflation was what I've been playing that game for since the early 80s. I've never seen somebody just, I don't even know any other way to say it, just take an economy to shit that
Yeah.
freaking quick. Just everything he's doing makes the only, and this, not to be conspiratorial about it, the only way that it makes sense is if it's on purpose, because he's doing all the things, he's doing the opposite of the things you would do if you were trying to stimulate economic growth. And my concern, I don't hear a lot of people talking about it, is when you consider how we're sort of resetting the alliances to be more towards China and Russia and less towards our, traditional allies. These guys are going to mess around, and the U.S. dollar is not going to be the reserve currency. And
Right.
you're talking about, so if all of a sudden the yuan is the reserve currency instead of the dollar. I've been thinking about it. I haven't really researched what the ramifications are, but they're not good, right?
No,
If
it can't
oil
be.
starts
Right.
trading in a currency other than the dollar,
Right.
what the crap? So um, not to get too far off topic, the other thing that I think that's interesting to look at, and we've talked about this before, is they're snatching up all these people, and where are they putting them? In
Right.
these prison stocks. You know,
Right.
that's another
Right.
interesting thing to look at. So, something I don't think I did when we first started up. Talk a little bit about your newsletter, and for folks who don't know, I introduced mine. Of course, on the Journeyman newsletter, and folks know. But just um, Kind of give
Yeah,
us a little bit
so
of background.
we do a lot of the same stuff, covering like the intersection of politics and race. Um, you know, for me, I'd name my newsletter "Decolonize Journalism" just because, like you, we look at things from a different perspective, right? We look at it from, a lot of most things, the racial aspect of it, because that's frankly, it's there every time. We understand a lot of the laws are written, with a racial component and things like that, and how we report things is also reported in that sense too. And I bring this up often because I always remember Charlie D'Agata after the war in Ukraine broke out, and he's over there in Ukraine, and everybody's evacuating, and he makes the comment of, these are blonde-haired, blue-eyed children, from a civilized country. They're like you and
I
me.
remember that.
They're not like some kids in faraway Middle East country.
Hmm.
And I was like, what in the racism was that, Charlie D'Agata?
I
Like,
actually
what?
wrote something about that. It was so stunning, but
I
that
know.
lets you
And
know the perception, right?
right, and he wasn't the only one. There was a French reporter that did it, a couple other reporters from Western countries, and I just thought, like, well, there you have it. There's the thing we've all been talking about. We've been talking about like how our local news portrays Black people and Latinos and stuff like that compared to the way they portray white people, and now here you are seeing it on a global scale, and so decolonized journalism is the knowledge that that's kind of stuff happens, and we do everything in our power to avoid it, and instead center the right people, the right narrative, the right voices in the conversation. And that's basically why the newsletter is called that. Um, I love it. I enjoy doing.
A lot of times it's about reporting the context that mainstream media missed, or certain things like that. Like when I caught that um, Pete Hegseth was wanting to have unilateral control over drone strikes, and to take that power from the president. That's a power granted to the president.
Sure.
And he was in Germany when he said that, and I can't. Everybody's focus was on something else. All the media was focused on something else, and he said that, and I was like, wait a minute. Let's rewind that again and let me make sure I heard that right. And it was at a time when they were trying to say that the cartels were terrorists and trying to equate a lot of stuff with the border as terrorism. And then here they are militarizing the border even more. And Hegseth is saying this. And I'm like, I know we're a long way away from this happening, but we're kind of opening the door for Hegseth to call for drone strikes at the border
Mm,
on somebody he suspects of being a terrorist.
mm.
And that's the danger of how this rhetoric gets to that point, is we try to see it ahead of time and try to let people know, like, look, I hope I'm wrong about this, but just be aware that this is where this could lead if we don't change how we talk about it. And
I know what you mean, Arturo. I've been on Substack now for about 5 years, which sounds like when I tell people that they're like, they even know Substack been around that long. Uh,
right,
but I was publishing mine. I started during COVID just because at the insistence of my family, because they were tired of me shouting at the TV, and they said, "Why don't you just write that down instead and tell some folks?"
yeah,
But
yeah,
but the thing is, I was looking the other day at something I wrote. Man, it had to be like in 2019 or 2020, talking about fascism. And I remember in fact, it was on election day, I guess, when Trump ran for his second term. And, I had published something that was talking about, and, at the time, it really sounded hyperbolic, right? And now, when I look back at that one or two paragraphs, it was like, it doesn't even seem like it was near enough, you know,
right,
just
right.
considering where we're at now. So, what I try to do with these kind of conversations is, having been on Substack for a while, um, it's getting browner and blacker than it's ever
Right.
been, but people
Right.
don't really know who's here. I mean, unless you're, Don Lemon, of course, he's got no issue. People are gonna find Don Lemon and Joy
Right.
Reid, and no shade. I mean, they certainly deserve it, but there are a lot of us out here like yourself and several others that, in my opinion, have ideas and expertise that's just as good, but people just don't know about us,
Right.
right?
Right.
And not for nothing, and I'm actually writing something about this. Um, Substack throws a lot of money at certain folks,
Yeah.
and it's not that are not like us, as they say, right?
Right.
And
Right.
look, it's their platform to do with what they want. I've made the choice in terms of the tools that they give you. It's really hard to beat. I mean, to do what we
Right.
can do on Substack, you probably have to find three other different ways of doing it.
Right.
So we had a term in trading back when I was in that business. Substack's the least dirty shirt. you know
Right. It is.
It's the
It
least
is.
dirty shirt, right? So if you got a basket full of shirts, this is the least dirty one. You put that one on, right? So
Right.
so that's kind of the way I look at it. And there are, I mean, if you look back, folks who don't know what I've been trying to do, just this last month, I've really tried to bring in some people. Not that my platform is that big, but you know, there are a lot of folks like Khalil Green and
Right.
some others that I've tried to connect with, that I want the people who are subscribing to my newsletter to know that they're around. And so, and to the extent that people can support what I'm trying to do, it's almost like this. So I won't call any names, but there's someone that used to be a journalist for the New York Times, and they kind of had the idea, I can make more money out here being a slightly right wing woman, right, than I can make being a journalist at this particular newspaper. Substack has partnered with this person.
Yeah.
This person's got a newsroom on Substack, and I will call it out in writing rather than here. But I was reading, the numbers are just stunning. I mean, in
Right.
terms of paid subscribers, and I mean, this woman's newsletter, she's clocking like 800 grand a year on Substack.
Wow.
And I would like to see more of that spread around, but if history's any guide, we can't wait on somebody to do it for us, right?
Right.
So,
Right.
all that to say, people who are listening to my little, TED talk here, if you can afford to, throw some coins at Arturo. If you can afford to become a paid subscriber, please do. But yeah, I see the surprise down in the comments. Yeah, there are folks on Substack raking in 6 and 7 figures, doing
Yeah.
exactly what we're doing, and not for nothing, they're not on this side of the fence. And it's typical if you think about it. It's just we see the same thing in just legacy media, where you have Fox News, but there's no real left side of that equation.
Right. Right.
I mean, people want to say MSNBC is that, but everybody on MSNBC used to be a Republican.
Yeah.
I mean, Bernie Sanders ain't on MSNBC. I mean, but you know
Right.
what I'm saying. And I'm not criticizing MSNBC any more than any of the other ones. I'm just saying we have to just build our own shit, y'all. And
Right.
we have to support our stuff or it's going to go away. I mean, I try to do this, and I swear, y'all, if you saw the ramshackle setup that I have to do what I'm doing, you would really not have a problem paying $5 a month for my newsletter.
Right. Yeah.
But
I'm
man,
the
I'm
same way.
juggling subscriptions and doing all kind of stuff, trying to make it so that I can tell stories that I think mean something. So
Right.
anyway, I'll stop there. But it's before I started this call with you or this stream, I told my wife, I said, it's just like, I mean, it's income inequality, just like everywhere else. You got
Yeah.
these people that are getting seriously paid, and I'm not even making a comment on their credibility or whatever. I'm just saying they're no better than you in terms of what you know and your expertise. So why is that? You know. So anyway, um, hopefully folks understand where I'm coming from, and it makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I know who you're talking about, and I won't
I
say
thought you would.
anything, but yeah, it's
It blows me away when I started, because I was like, how all these people got thousands of paid subscribers? How is that? What? Am I just not saying it right?
yeah.
Is there a secret question I need to be asking or whatever? And yeah, man. But if the person who owns the platform lifts you up, then there it is, right?
Right.
There it is.
Right.
So
Right.
that's
Like,
all it takes.
yeah. I don't.
Everybody needs a sponsor.
Right. I
So
don't
to the
blame.
extent that I can be somebody's sponsor, I'll do
Right. I don't
it.
blame I don't blame anybody for jumping at the chance to work with
No,
Substack.
shoot. If
You
they hey,
know.
if they looked over here and said, "Hey, journeyman, we see
Right.
you," I'd be
Right.
like, "Yeah, I'm right here.
Yeah.
Here's my account information."
I know a ton of great writers. We can make a newsroom real
Well,
quick.
that dude, that's what I'm seriously trying. Believe me, we'll have that conversation offline. But that is exactly what I'm thinking. That we know the writers.
Right. Right.
A lot of them just aren't on Substack yet, but they
Right.
will be. They will be, and they should be.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
They will. They will be.
so I guess maybe this is as good of a place as any to wrap it up. But tell people what I want to do, just so everybody knows. What I try to do is give me a day or two, and I'll send out a recorded version of this for anybody that missed it. It'll be shareable. And what I try to also do is drop some links to some of the stuff we've talked about. So, like your article that you just put out, I'll make sure it's in there. Some of my stuff that I referenced, I'll do the same. If there's some news, the piece you mentioned where when we started out talking about the Alien Enemies Act, I'd love to be able to drop a link to that, um, to the extent we can. So, we'll
Okay.
make sure we put it out there. And like everything on my channel, it's all free to read, and
Same here. Yeah.
we'll put it out there for the people.
Right on. Oh, yeah.
Arturo, man, as always, it's great talking to you. I always learn something.
Heck yeah. Good to see you, Marlon.
All right. Okay, folks. Stay safe.
All
We'll
right,
see you
guys.
next time.